Intervals. Today we'll talk a little bit about intervals for violin players. In order to understand this topic, it would be a good idea to start maybe with a keyboard, piano keyboard, because it's more visual. So what is an interval? An interval, it's a space or distance between two notes. For example, if you take, for example, C note, and maybe we should kind of go over our names of the keys. So that's your C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So that's one octave. We call it an octave, or 8 notes. So when we're talking about the distance between the two notes, we are literally talking about the names of the notes. For example, between, let's say, this is your C note and that's your D note. So the distance between this note and that note, we call it interval of a second. A second. Why second? Why not one? Why not just one? Interval 1, because it's just a step up. Well, because of the names of the notes. We're using two names of the notes. We're using C and D. And sometimes it's a good idea just to use your fingers and say C, D. How many letters did you say? 2. So that's going to be interval of a second. The distance between, let's say, C and E, again, if you count your names of the notes, you'll have to include the C and you will need to include the E. So if you count, it goes C, D, E. So again, you can use your fingers. C, D, E, 3. So we call it interval of a third. So the distance between C and E, we call it a third. And then the same way you can increase the space, right, between C and F. Now you can count 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be a fourth. It's better to go with maybe names of the notes versus the keys, actually, because it can be confusing sometimes. But to start with, you can, if you're using only the white keys and you're not using any sharps or flats, it would be okay to count just the keys like that as well. So between C and F, again, it's C, D, E, F, 4. So it's a fourth. Between C and G, that would be a fifth. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th, 7th, and 8th, or an octave. An octave. Octave means 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. An octave. Okay, so these are the intervals on the keyboard. Let's move now to the whiteboard and see if you can recognize them when you're playing them in your music. So let's just start by putting a treble clef. Okay, and let's just pick first line note. So that would be our E note. Okay, so the way our intervals look, you have to count all the notes that can fit between the two notes, including these two notes. So let's just take the closest we can get, right next step, right? You know the pattern. Our notes moving in a stepwise motion when you're using the pattern line, space. The next one would be line, space. Maybe it would be a good idea to just to give you an example. So this is how you see stepping up. It's like a scale, one step at a time. So you can see that's the pattern of your notes. Okay, so if you see, for example, in your music you have a line note, and then you see the next note is this, in a line, right, line to line, it means that you're skipping this one. Okay, so that's important to recognize. So let's just go back and calculate the distance between this, let's say, these two notes. So we have this one and that one, that's an F. So the distance between E and F, Again, you need to use the names of the notes, the letter names. So E, F, 1, 2. So that's going to be a second, second, second. Okay. Now, let's just say in your music, you have that E note to start, and then you have something like that. Okay. So what's the name of that note? It's A. And so you can count by saying the names of the notes. You can use your fingers if it's hard. So go E, F, G, A. So 4. So that's interval of a fourth. Okay. Let's try another one. So let's just say you have this note and that note. Okay. So notice first that this is a line note, and this is note that goes on the line. So that's a G, that's a D, right? So if you count the distance between G and D, again, G, A, B, C, D, so that gives you a fifth. Notice that fifth, usually it's line to line. Now, also if you have, let's say, these two notes, it's also a fifth. So now, this is F and this is C. It's a space to space, right? So there's certain like a pattern you can use to remember your intervals, the way they look. So let's start one more time from the first one. So we have the closest, it's a second. Well, there is a prime if you just have E, E or unison. That would be if we repeat the same note, but we'll start with the second. Okay, so that's the second. So you can see one note is on the line, the other one is between the lines. So that's the pattern for the seconds. Let's go back to the E, and now let's build a third. The third, you can see there's a line to another line. So how does our fourth would look? Fourth, it's a mix, line to space. A fifth, line to line. We talked about it here, right? Remember, line to line or space to space. So that's a fifth. So by recognizing those patterns, like line to line, you can easier, faster read or faster play your music. Okay, 6 is another mix. You have line note, and then the second note will be the space. And then we have two more. We have a seventh, right? So let's just do E. Then we have D. Seventh, usually it's easily recognizable. It's a line to line or space to space, but you can see it's, if this is E, this is D. So it's one step smaller than perfect octave. Okay, so we have E to E, right? That would be the octave or eighth. So these are the pattern of the notes. So if you're using seconds, so it will be always a mix. One note is on the line, the second note is between the lines. So if let's say you start with F, so the G would be the note, so it's a mix. Thirds, usually it's line to line or space to space, so is fifth and seventh. And then fourth, sixth, and eighth, it's always line to space. Or if you start with a space, it will be to line. So using this visual patterns will kind of help you to play your intervals, or we call them double stops, a little bit faster. Okay, so that's our first part of our conversation about intervals. Next video is going to be about actual playing intervals on the violin. Okay, well, happy practicing.